So, just to make sure I understand, you would like to find a legit mouthpiece as an alternative to your Wedge 65S in order to blend better when you play in the orchestra or some other setting that requires a darker sound.
Yes, but perhaps even more importantly, I want to show the world that I am a real man, because I have survived the mouthpiece rite of passage of using mouthpieces that are progressively bigger and bigger. And to prove I am a capable legit player, I am worried that if I show up with anything other than a big mouthpiece, people will not take me seriously.
Some people think you should play the biggest mouthpiece you can, especially in a legit setting, but that is now being questioned by many players and teachers. Jens Lindemann has an excellent YouTube video about how one of the most common problems he sees is college students playing on a mouthpiece that is too big for them. Large mouthpieces do have certain advantages, but playing something as big as a Bach 1.5C or larger also has disadvantages.
Oh, so I shouldn't be so self-conscious about having small equipment.
No, what really matters is what you can do with it.
Well, that's encouraging.
Mouthpieces that size can work really well for strong players, and make sense in large symphony orchestras where a big, dark, broad sound is required. But people playing in smaller ensembles, like a community orchestra, or intermediate and advanced amateurs, or players like you who have other primary gigs often do better on something slightly smaller.
What's the problem with using a mouthpiece that large?
Here is what I most often see. Players using a mouthpiece that is too big for them complain about range and endurance despite lots of practice. They have a big fat low register, but the sound quickly gets small and strained sounding above the staff, and peaks at around high C. Their sound profile is shaped like a short pyramid, big at the bottom and small and pointy at the top. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, that's what happened when I tried the Bach 1. Well, actually in the first 5 minutes I had almost the same range on the Bach 1 as on the 65S, but it felt harder, and the notes were smaller at the top of my range. But after a few minutes my range was less, and eventually my chops were gone. It was very embarrassing when it first happened. It's a good thing I'm a pretty good singer. Otherwise it could have been quite humiliating.
Some players have all the range and endurance they need on a large mouthpiece, which is great. But many players have not yet reached that level of playing, or never will for various reasons, but still use a large mouthpiece. Using a large mouthpiece can actually limit their playing. For those players, a slightly smaller mouthpiece makes a lot of sense. Some players who actually can get everything they need from a large mouthpiece still choose to play a slightly smaller one for the sake of efficiency and sometimes longevity.
Longevity is important as a lead trumpet player.
Yes. A smaller mouthpiece can reduce some of the wear and tear on the chops over the years.
So what are the downsides of the smaller mouthpiece?
You get a slightly smaller sounding lower register, and a somewhat more compact sound. What you lose in the lower register you usually more than gain in the upper register, and the ease of playing in that range allows you to be more focused on the music and less focused on hitting the notes. With a properly fitted legit mouthpiece you still won't have quite the range as on your lead mouthpiece, but you should have the range you need and a sound that will blend better in an orchestral setting. It is a good trade-off for many players.
What was the middle part again? Never mind. Dr. Dave, you are melting my brain again, but I do trust you. What size mouthpiece do you think I should try?
I would suggest trying a legit mouthpiece with an inner diameter the same size or one size larger than your lead piece. Since you are using a 65S, that would mean a 65 or 66 rim.
Okay, how do I choose?
Well, the 65 rim in a legit mouthpiece will feel exactly like your 65S rim. So if you like consistency, that would be a good choice. If you want a slightly bigger sound, you could go with a slightly larger 66 rim. Your endurance would probably be better on the 65 rim. Some players like to use the same rim to avoid what some people refer to as chop confusion.
I do get confused easily.
That's okay, you are a lead player.
You have a good point there.
Besides, choosing a new mouthpiece can be complicated for anyone. Using the same rim for everything works well for some people. But from my experience, most players actually can shift between rim sizes without difficulty. For example, most classical players use a smaller rim on the piccolo trumpet without any problem, and lots of players like you who do different types of playing will have a larger rim for legit and a smaller one for lead and pops.
Piccolo trumpet. I tried one of those once. I was hoping to gain an octave in range, but it was just stuffy and backed up the more I pushed it, and my range was about the same. I felt like it was fighting me. It was very unforgiving and frustrating to play.
Yes, the piccolo trumpet is an unforgiving and frustrating little beast. Which reminds me, do you know the difference between a piccolo trumpet and a trampoline?
No.
You usually take your shoes off before you jump up and down on a trampoline.
That's good advice. I will remember that the next time I borrow my friend's pick. So Dr. Dave, what do you suggest?
I usually recommend going with a rim one size larger if you have the chops, and if your lead piece has an ID less than 0.66 inches.
ID?
Inner diameter.
Oh, so what is the ID of my 65S?
0.65 inches. That's how wedge rim sizes are named.
Okay, what cup should I get?
Well, the usual options would be an MDV or MV cup. The MDV cup is like a Bach 1.5 C cup depth, and the MV is like a Bach 3 C cup depth.
The Bach 3C is shallower than the Bach 1.5 C? You are melting my brain again.
Yes, the Bach cup depths are a bit confusing, even for people who are not lead players. The 7C is one of the deepest C cups. The 5C and 3C get progressively shallower as you go up in rim size. Then the 1.5 C is deep again, but not quite as deep as a 7C.
Then why is the 7C a beginner mouthpiece?
It became popular as a beginner mouthpiece because Vincent Bach liked it and included one with new trumpets. It feels small because of the rim shape, but the diameter is actually very close to a 5C. So this whole thing about graduating from the 7C to more advanced mouthpieces does not really make much sense.
How do I choose between the MV and MDV cup?
The MDV cup is the typical orchestral cup. It will produce the darker sound usually desired for that setting. It will have a nice fat low register.
That sounds good. I'll take that one. It sounds like the perfect mouthpiece for me.
Wait. There is more. The MDV cup will not be as supportive in the upper register, so as you tire you will probably lose more range.
That doesn't sound good.
Well, it can be an issue for some people. The MV cup will sound a bit brighter than the MDV cup, and will not sound as big in the low register, but the top end will be easier. But it will still blend okay in the orchestra, especially if you dampen some of the brighter overtones by using a heavy backbore.
This is all a bit confusing. What's the bottom line, Dr. Dave?
The bottom line is this. First of all, there is no substitute for practice. You have to do the work to build strength and technique in order to have range and endurance. If you are using a larger mouthpiece like a Bach 1.5 C and it is working well for you, meaning you have the sound you want and all the range and endurance you need without beating up your chops, you should stick with that size. If you are practicing as much as you can, and still struggle with range and endurance, or feel really beat up on a regular basis, you should consider trying a slightly smaller diameter with a similar cup depth in order to keep a similar sound. If that does not do the job, you should consider a slightly shallower cup and smaller diameter, perhaps with a heavier backbore, to dampen the brighter overtones and make the sound a bit darker. Those are good strategies for most players.
Okay, that's great, but it's still hard to decide. What do you think would be the perfect legit mouthpiece for me? I have heard Chris Smith playing a wedge mouthpiece in the San Diego Symphony. He sounds fantastic. I want to sound just like him. Does he have a signature mouthpiece? If he does, I want that one. I think it would be the perfect mouthpiece for me.
Chris is a great guy and an amazing player. He has posted all sorts of fantastic content on Facebook. If you have not seen it, you should search his name or search Trombachris. He has a bunch of custom wedges, and we are going to be introducing a new signature mouthpiece soon. But first, Chris is going to come and visit the shop again so we can tweak a few things while he is here. So it might be a while before we have one.
Okay, well, when he does have a signature mouthpiece, I want one. I think it would be perfect for me.
There is no such thing as a perfect mouthpiece. There are always compromises. And what works for Chris might not work for you. Getting back to your particular needs, you have good high chops, so you probably don't need the extra range of the MV Cup. Your challenge is fitting in with the orchestra.
Yes, you are right. I have always had a bit of trouble fitting in. I think that is partly why I became a lead trumpet player.
That's not exactly what I meant, but that actually explains a lot. Since blending with the orchestra is more important than any concerns about your range, I think getting the deeper 66 mdv would be the best choice. If you end up having problems with endurance using the deeper cup, we can always do an exchange for the slightly smaller 65 mdv. That will add some endurance without sounding significantly brighter.
You mean I can do an exchange?
Yes, we have a 90-day return policy.
Oh, I forgot about that. Wait, are you messing with me, Dr. Dave? No mouthpiece company offers a 90-day money-back guarantee.
That is true. Except for us. But that is why we are not just any mouthpiece company.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
There is more. We also offer a lifetime trade-in program. If you decide a year or two down the road that you need a new mouthpiece, you can send your Wedge back for an 80% credit toward a new mouthpiece of a different size.
Dr. Dave, now you are really messing with me. A lifetime trade-in program on mouthpieces. That's just ridiculous.
I am actually not messing with you. We take pride in being a different type of mouthpiece company. We know people's needs can change over time. That is especially true of developing players and students. So we make it easy to upgrade your mouthpiece if you need to.
That's fantastic. Dr. Dave, I have one last question. Do you think Kevin, the principal trumpet player, will look down on me because my mouthpiece is not as big as his when they call me back to join the orchestra?
Well. Let's see. Let's just say that I really don't think you need to be worried about that.
Thanks, Dr. Dave. That's really great news. Well, I have to get going now. I decided to take Kevin's advice. I have an appointment in half an hour for my very first drum lesson. I am going to be a multi-instrumentalist.